Hello, my name is Katie Sando and welcome to the Marketing Forum podcast, where we learn about the professional world of brilliant marketers, communicators and creatives. In this episode, I am joined by Christian Thomson, who is the founder and CEO of Marwick Marketing. His story is really interesting. He started out as a surfer of all things, with Fatface as his sponsor. He caught the marketing bug watching how Fatface's marketing team operated, and he worked with the Watergate Bay Hotel marketing team before starting his own surf school business. A few years later, he touched down in Canada and started his own digital marketing agency, which has now turned into Marwick Marketing. Super interesting story of how he literally went from a one-man band into what was last year the 11th fastest growing company in Western Canada. Really inspiring story and lots of inspiration, particularly if you are running your own business. I hope you enjoy. Hey Christian, thank you so much for joining us on the Marketing Forum podcast. So I wanted to start off by asking you how a professional surfer manages to get himself into the marketing department of a hotel.
That's a very good story. Good question. So I guess being a professional surfer, you have to be sponsored by someone, and that typically is the marketing department. And I was very fortunate in my kind of early 20s, mid 20s to be on full salary from a clothing company called Fatface, and through that I had additional sponsors like the Watergate Bay Hotel and some others as well. So I actually got to work pretty closely with the marketing departments in all those brands, and that's where I kind of like got my first experience in marketing.
What you were surfing? You said you were surfing longboard, and so tell me about that. Are you literally surfing around the world?
Yeah, I think at last count I surfed in 42 different countries. Just back then, kind of like writing about it a lot more rather than competing, so a lot more around blogs, and when blogs became kind of first popular and social media was being adopted. So it's kind of like the content creation, like old school content creation.
Like magazines and stuff. Yeah.
So I actually failed English at GCSE, but I've probably written about 36 articles for a range of magazines and newspapers because of marketing myself and marketing the brands that I was associated with.
But so you were also surfing though, weren't you? You weren't just writing.
Oh yeah.
Cool. I remember when I first got I can't remember when Fatface launched, but I remember I don't know how I ended up getting it, but I ended up getting like a catalogue, like, you know, like they used to have a magazine catalogue through the post.
The mail. Yeah.
And I must have been pretty young, but I thought they did a really good job of selling the vibe. Because I was like, wow, look at these people camping and then like having so much fun.
Yeah, they had, I think it was mid 80s they launched, and Tim and Jules created it just to pay their way to live on the mountains in the Alps. So they kind of kept that core vibe going for a pretty long time. And when I got involved with them, they were doing extremely well. I think at the time they had like 120 odd stores. The marketing department was made up of the original crew that had grown them from 2 or 3 guys and girls to where they were then. So they had pretty much free reign and creative free reign to continue that vibe that had gotten from where they were to where they were at the time. So it was really cool to see.
Do you think that when creative teams, marketing teams have that free reign, that the result is often better, or do you think it can go a bit off piste?
I think in this case it was better because the marketing team at Fatface actually lived and breathed what they were selling. Right. So it was almost like there wasn't any real selling. It was that they truly enjoyed doing something different and kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit, because they had seen it from day one. So it was, I think if they had been given free reign, but they'd just come in as new recruits, it would maybe be a little bit more disastrous.
Yeah.
But because they kind of truly believed in the company values and the brand voice and what it actually meant, then free reign wasn't a problem.
Mm. And so you watching this, that's how you then kind of got close to what marketing was?
Yeah, for me, it was obviously you have the end result of like higher revenue, more sales, whatever, more lead generation. But to get there, you can be as creative as you want. And actually the more creative the looking for opportunities, and the more you did that, the more you were rewarded. And so that was kind of like a really cool, again, so it's not like I'm working in finance where I have to provide this report by Friday, or it's do whatever you can to build that brand awareness and that loyalty and that lead generation. So that it was really cool to see that. And it looked like they had lots of fun as well.
What were you seeing specifically that you just thought like, because of the kind of things like I described when I see like the like booklet and they're creating a brand story?
I think it was, and it kind of spills over into like this, like my personal surfing as well. Like you obviously like to do that to get paid full time, especially back then. There was a lot of like promoting your own personal brand as well. And I think it's just that seeing them, either Fat Face or myself, like doing something like that you just create, well, that hasn't really been done before, and then seeing it evolve into something tangible, like a magazine article or a video that people then are talking about. And then it's like, it was just a really like, from seeing an idea come to fruition and then to actually be talked about, it's kind of was rewarding, or still is kind of rewarding.
I know. It's so fun, isn't it, when you can take stuff from like literally just a bunch of people in a room coming up with ideas, and then within a reasonably short space of time, you're like, ta-da!
Yeah, exactly.
And then you just have to hope it works.
Yeah.
So when did you decide to kind of rein the surfing in and move into like kind of less
it was
like more corporate, but...
Yeah, it was, well, there was like a transitional period for sure. So while I was being paid by Fat Face, so I realized that wouldn't go on forever. And so what I decided to do at the time was capitalize on, I'd been a surf coach for like a long time before that. So I decided to set up a surf travel business. And so I think when I was about 24, I set up Errant Surf Holidays, and we had a surf school in Newquay, and we would run in trips to the Maldives, and we had a surf camp, surf school, and a bar in Spain. And it was just crazy kind of 8 years. And that was not piggybacking, but that was riding the tailcoats of Fat Face as well. So all this creative stuff I'd seen in the Fat Face team, and the team at Watergate Bay as well, like do from a creative point of view, events and sponsorships and all this kind of stuff. I did with Errant Surf, and very quickly it became like one of the biggest, if not the biggest, travel companies in the world, specializing in surfing, and in terms of volume of passengers. And then, and a lot of that again was in the early days was like being the first to adopt websites that you could book online. It sounds really like minor now, but like we were the first website you could actually book online. We were one of the first companies to adopt social media, and then social media advertising, and then SEO, and all those kind of things that I was teaching myself along the way, because we didn't have any money to put into the business. Yeah. So it's easier to teach. And so then I did that till about 2011. And then just through like my wife Teresa got sick, so we ended up moving to Canada, which is where she's from, and we left the whole surfing thing behind. And I realized that a former professional longboarder / surf coach, there isn't much work for someone living in Canada. So I was like, oh crap, what am I still good at? And then I was like, oh, hang on, like basically digital marketing is what I've been doing for the last 12 years, since like early 2000s. And then realized that there were a ton of businesses out there that were terrible at digital marketing, and started to introduce myself. And that's where kind of end of 2012, it created like Marwick, the digital marketing agency in Canada. And that was the transition into that. And now Marwick is we're a team of 23 still in Canada, but more recently we've moved back to Cornwall to come full circle for the family, but then also to open up on this side of the pond. So that's the short version of a long story.
I remember when I was at university, I thought it would be really cool to move to Canada. So I did one of the little tests. You can basically do like the entrance exam, can't you, to work out whether or not. I did really poorly because they're only ever looking for people that are working in, well, they were predominantly looking for like agriculture and engineers and mining. And I was like, not one of those people.
Oh, man. Yeah, that's you should. Yeah, that's an unfortunate test because I guess it depends where you go in Canada as well, because there's still a lot of other things to do.
Yeah,
but yeah,
I mean, you married a Canadian, which it's a different route in.
It's an easier route.
It's a much easier route.
Oh, it's still time, still there.
I know, exactly. So I'm interested in a whole swathe of different things here. So I guess in the first instance, what I'm really interested in is you really started Marwick then from literally, nothing. So were you, so you said you started introducing yourself to companies. Were you literally doing that? Just sort of approaching and saying, actually, I can help you out with this? Yeah.
And this is one of the weirdest experiences of my life, because if you're taking like the 12, 15 years prior to landing in Canada, because of the surfing, because of the fact base, because you build up that kind of like personal brand, and you're like, if you want to do something, like if you wanted to put on a surf contest for kids, like you'd have a network of people and you can make it happen. And so at least you kind of know know people. It's not like, but landing in Canada, the weirdest thing was I literally knew no one. Like there was no network, there was no errant surf, there was no fat face. So you're like, no one knows you and no one knows anything about you. And so there was two ways to look at it. One was it's a complete nightmare, or one was it's an opportunity to create like maybe a version 2 or like a V2.
No, I know what you mean.
So I was like, okay. So yeah, it was literally like going to chamber events and wearing a suit and tie and getting a haircut and just trying to connect with people, and a laptop. And like some of my first early clients were really small businesses, but it just needed some traction. So yeah.
Even now then, do you find that a lot of your clients will come through network, or are you at the stage where you're more likely to be found just through reputation? And
I think referrals for sure. And then our own digital marketing as well.
Which I imagine you guys are pretty good at.
I think we're okay at it. Yeah.
So tell me how then in that time period digital marketing has evolved, because like you say, you said you started the business in 2012.
Yeah.
So even in the last 10 years, digital marketing's like boomed, hasn't it?
It's gone crazy. And even in the last year, it's gone even more crazy. So I guess in the early days, it was more about helping companies update their website to something that looks a little nicer and to get them on social media. And now it's more about conversion tracking or conversion rate optimization and just like getting a return on ad spend and on Google Ads and all that kind of like, it's a little bit more, where it's a lot more kind of granular and a lot more data driven. Whereas back then it was still like, why are you still advertising in the yellow pages? You need to be, your customers have been looking for you for the last 2 years online, and you're still spending 10 grand a year on these print ads. Whereas now it's more of like a very much more like holistic kind of like conversion driven approach.
Do you look at businesses when they come to you then and almost create a digital strategy which will depends on what their business is doing? You'll advise certain, or do you just think everyone needs to be doing everything?
No, we when I say we, Marwick is very much a heavily focused agency in the world of like search. So like organic search, which is SEO, or Google ads, like search ads. So what we're able to do, because that's really really data driven, we can look at how a website's performing right now in search engines, look at how many people are looking for that service, and then just by taking into consideration things like search volume, conversion rate, we can then actually say, like, if you improve by X, you're going to get Z more revenue. Like there's no flimsiness about it. It's like, okay, if you were here, this is how much revenue is being generated by these search terms. So for every business, it's completely different. And even two businesses in the same town will have different opportunities and strengths and weaknesses based on the website and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Are there any businesses and sectors where you just think it doesn't really work because it's too expensive, or because, isn't like law really expensive?
Yeah, law is really expensive. You're like talking like 30, 40 pounds a click. But they know, like, if they convert 1 in 10, that's only cost them like £300 or £400, and that case might earn them £10,000. So it's a different game. I think where, like, at the other end of the spectrum, where it doesn't make sense, low value, low frequency. So like haircuts, like a hairdresser's or a barbershop, that the cost of that transaction is low, and the frequency is probably every 6 to 8 weeks at best for a barbershop. So spending money on search ads and SEO might not be the best way to spend that money. You're probably better off creating the brands on social media. So there's definitely some businesses that don't work well with search.
Do you guys do all of that stuff as well? Like because there's your digital footprint is it's massive now as a business if you want it to be, isn't it? Do you kind of get involved in all of those elements as well, like the broader things like social and some of the other like advertising places?
We do, yeah. So we're, like I said, we're a team of 22, 23, and the 80% of what we do is search. But just because of the nature of like the digital landscape, we have like social media people in-house, graphic designers in-house, content writers, because they all kind of slightly overlap into search. And for a lot of businesses, it makes sense to have it all in one place because they do need to kind of connect. The content you're putting out in blogs for SEO are going to be shared on your social media channels. So how they're shared can influence the SEO and all that kind of stuff. So it's good to have them. Yeah.
I hear a lot about digital PR these days. Is that something that you guys do much of? Have you heard much about it?
So that's where we draw the line. PR is like, it's such a different channel to what we do. There's some great PR firms out there, even like locally, like Excess Energy and so on, where digital PR plays an important role from our perspective is that kind of link generation and that footprint or away from your website. So those company mentions online and so on. But the art of PR is that, would definitely leave that to the PR firms.
I think there's going to be some seriously interesting collaborations around that though in the future, where traditional PR agencies then start collaborating with digital first agencies like you guys, and there's going to be some really interesting new campaigns that we didn't think of before. Yeah,
I think we've only been in the UK since September, and we're already seeing some very strong partnerships around that kind of idea for sure. Definitely some come out this summer. So.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah, that's all I can say.
Top secret. I'll keep an eye out.
Top secret.
Yeah. Tell me more about running an agency then. How do you find it? Because you have worked client side, because you've been like in the Watergate Bay Hotel. So agency side, was that something when you started in 2012, was it something that you thought you would end up developing?
Yes. It's more around the business structure. So I think that anyone looking to start an agency should prepare themselves for a few years of just chaos. And particularly if you're not coming in with like a whole bank of cash and you're going to hire a bunch of people right out the gate, but you're going to be wearing many hats. And actually that's what I was doing with the Air and Surf company. Like I never actually moved out of that owner operator mode.
Yeah.
And so landing in Canada and being version 2 of myself, I was like, okay, I have to move out of this owner operator position as quick as I can. And so it wasn't about, in the early days of Mark, it wasn't about making money. It wasn't about growth. It was about getting me as redundant as possible, as quick as possible. So then I could just focus on building the business, not working on it.
Yeah.
So that was like a good thing. So from an agency perspective, it's been interesting because I've been able to keep it quite fresh, because my week on week, month on month, year on year keeps changing, because I'm not in the weeds kind of doing the client work where I'd just be going round and round in circles. So that would be the biggest thing, is to move away. Like I said to my team, probably in year 3, when I started to build a team, I think we're only like 5 people at the time, that to, like we'd always just, they loved the fact that I come from a surfing background, because our agency was based in the mountains. And I always used the phrase, like if I got eaten by a whale surfing Tofino on Vancouver Island, what are we missing? Could you guys operate without me? So we'd always trying to figure out a way to make me sackable.
No, I totally buy into that. I always think that in even in a company, if you're in a fairly traditional hierarchical company, I think as a manager, if you can make yourself as redundant as possible, it forces you to be innovative. But when you're like doing the day-to-day, it does become, you just do it, aren't you?
Totally. And that's where that agency like client relationship comes in, because like if you are a marketing coordinator or a marketing manager and you're on your own, like you want to be outsourcing a lot of the legwork to an agency so that you can manage the strategy and the people, not being in the weeds doing the actual work. Because if you're a single person trying to run a company, all a company's channels across all channels, you're going to be really, really busy. And it's going to be hard to just even, take a break and look above, So it's very similar.
Yeah. I always used to look at what were the bits that I'm not specialist at, and therefore, but also kind of cross-reference that against what's reasonably cheap to buy.
Yeah.
Because I would be looking at a to-do list and you'd be like, I can't do all of this, but equally, there are experts out there. Why would I not use them?
Yeah, definitely. Like, and also what you enjoy doing as well, I guess, is if you, yeah.
True. What are the challenges for agencies? Is there, is it like the client relationships that are particularly challenging, or have you found yourself pretty lucky in that way?
I think as long as the expectations are set out at the beginning and there's like very clear communication. Like we've, unfortunately, not in the UK, but in Canada, we've let clients go because they're not communicating with us. And that has to be a two-way thing. Like if you're, like you'd expect the agency's getting paid, so the agency has to communicate a lot, which a lot of agencies don't, which is mind-boggling. But that also the client has to communicate back. So for like real success, like we don't, none of our clients are on a contract. Like we don't believe in like locking in anyone on a contract. It's just we work month to month, and we say we work on results and relationships. If you're seeing progress which will lead to success, and you enjoy working with us, then then there's no need for us to have a contract saying you're binding for the next 12 months.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think as long as the clients understand that from the beginning, then there's not any issues. Like we want long-term partnerships. We don't want short-term cash, and clients respect that. Yeah.
I always have a lot of respect for agencies where they are prepared to have those difficult conversations as well around things like, this isn't really working necessarily, whether or not it's because you treat our team really badly, or whether or not it's like you say, because they're not communicating. Do you get many clients that are not friendly, or do you just make sure that you just avoid them in the first instance?
We have a really good vetting process these days over years of trial and error. In like the early days of Mark, when I didn't have a vetting process at all and was desperate for any clients, I had some really bad clients, and they were rude, unreasonable, cheap. A list goes on, but you soon realize like that, like there's good clients and there's bad clients.
Yeah.
And it's about qualifying them at the beginning, and it's to the benefit of everyone, so being able to, I don't know, it's like dating, trying to find what people that like they're going to be a good match long term.
It's
not
exactly like the same ethos and the same approach. And I think it's important. I do feel like being a good client is something that there's so much, I think, about marketing that's not taught. And that's one of the things that's not taught. Like it's particularly if you're in an SME, there's nobody necessarily that walks you through like how to be a good client. And it's really important because it can massively impact how much you get out of an agency and how much success you get in your projects. If you can't bring people on board, then you're never going to be able to get the delivery. What for you, like, are the kinds of things? So you mentioned like communication. Is there other like real specifics where you think, even if it's things? So I think that it's helpful if you are able to have a relationship whereby you can challenge your agency, and, not in a sense where you're like being unreasonable, like you say, or tearing anyone down, but equally being able to have a slightly difficult conversation.
Absolutely. Like I know that our team love being challenged, and there's that fun, and that's that they will challenge each other internally to do as best they can. But when that comes from like one of our clients or a long-term client, they enjoy it. Like they like to be challenged. They like that. So that's always good. Communication for sure. And we constantly strive to be, we always imagine ourselves as literally like if you picked up our team and dropped them in the office, in your office, that's how they operate. And so what they also like is, or what our agency likes, is that kind of free flow of information as well. Like how are sales, what is the strategy for next year? How is it impacting the business? And when we get the bigger picture, then it inspires the team to find more ways to get there as well. 100%. We're very much like the worst thing on the flip side to that is we're not that kind of agency that you're going to pay once a month and not hear from until the following month. Like there's that kind of relationship exists in other places where it's kind of like a set and forget thing. So, which is really that's no good for anyone, and it's kind of boring. So we want to be the other end of that spectrum all the time.
I definitely think with outsourcing in general, it is about like you say, challenging, but also if I think it's really important to share the overarching strategy, like the overarching business strategy, but also your marketing strategy. As a marketer and, as a marketing consultant, there's nothing more annoying when somebody comes to me and says, I want you to do X. And I'm like, no, you tell me the problem and I'll tell you what we're going to do. And I think it's the same with agencies. Like we all do it. We're like, can you do this, this, and this? And I think like, actually, we'd be much better off if, we spoke to you and said, this is what we're trying to achieve. Like, this is what we're trying to achieve, like big picture wise. You guys might come up with something like 1,000,000 times better as an approach than what we can come up with.
It's just different. Yeah. And it just like for consideration, just to, it's better to have, like, a lot of time you've got like multiple brains working on it. Why not? You're paying them. Why not utilize them? Even if it's just to get a broader picture, and you may end up going with the original idea. You may take a hybrid approach to it. So
where do you think digital marketing is going to go?
Well, it's going crazy at the moment because of COVID, and it's like last year we were the 11th fastest growing company in Western Canada out of 500,000 companies, not just agencies, just companies. And then even since then, we've seen like a 30% increase in our agency, and it's all down, like it's all COVID. Like more and more businesses selling online, more and more businesses taking the time to have a better presence, and we're talking like local landscaping companies wanting to finally take the time out to revamp their website, or we're talking about huge national e-commerce brands that they're now putting more into it because they're generating more revenue. Where is it going to go from here? I think it's just going to be, it's going to be stronger and stronger. You got a massive Google update coming in May around user experience, which is going to be really important for every business to pay attention to, because that will impact a lot of websites that are underperforming. So I think you're just going to keep seeing it evolve and evolve, and who knows, which is so much.
It's, so I guess in my head, there's a couple of things. So I always find it curious when people are recruiting digital marketing people in-house, because I'm not sure necessarily what they mean by that anymore. So, I don't think it's possible to do a marketing role without touching digital, even if digital isn't like the primary element of your strategy. It has to be digital first anyway. Yeah.
Like the way we're set up at Marwick as well, as we have a dedicated people within our agency that are just training and educating and keeping our team up to date, and that keeps them busy. So I can't imagine trying to run digital marketing across multiple channels as a single person, because it's just, from what we're seeing, it's almost impossible to keep up as a group of people that have the time to be taking the time to train and stay up to date. Does that make sense?
100%. I completely agree with you. And I think that's one of the reasons why I always support outsourcing digital, because I say digital, I don't necessarily mean anything that's digital, specifically things like search SEO, because it is not physically possible to stay up to date with that kind of stuff, like you say, as a single individual. Because Google are updating, how often are you getting stuff through around updates because you're a Google partner?
Yeah, so we hold the Premier Google Partner Agency badge, and so basically it's really, like, for anyone listening that doesn't know what it is, it's really the only tangible accreditation agency can have globally to become an agency. As we can tell, I arrived in Canada with my laptop and started my agency. So the barrier to entry is pretty low.
It's the problem with anything in marketing, I think, is that the barrier to entry is low.
Yeah. Whereas so the first badge, the blue one, the Google Partner badge, is basically, if you have, as an individual, if you have all your qualifications and you're managing, I think it's about £10,000 a month in ad spend, and you do it well enough, then you get your blue badge, and it's kind of like a tangible certificate or accreditation. 98% of agencies will have that, or nothing at all. And then Marwick has the Premier Google Partner Agency badge, which is the red one, and that's only the top 2 or 3% of agencies across Europe and North America have that. And the reason that one's harder is your ad spend has to be over $1 million a year at least, and you need like a dozen or so team members that are qualified in that area. And that's not just Google search, that's YouTube advertising, that's Google shopping, Google display. And then just like Google has an algorithm for search, it has an algorithm for how well those accounts are being run. So it's kind of like quality control. So if we have to be optimizing our client accounts really well, otherwise we get like a traffic light red saying, "Oh no, you guys are losing it." So it's worth to fade. It's worth to fade, and it's worth spending like a little bit of time on that, because if you didn't know that as someone working in house and you're potentially looking to outsource it, like the price to hire an agency that doesn't have the badge, that has the badge or has the Premier badge is probably the same.
Yeah.
But the level of quality, the level of like service you get is much stronger. So anyway, yeah, that's what.
It's a real issue, actually, the low barrier to entry for marketing and anything in the space, isn't it?
Yeah.
You do see some horror stories as a result. But I'm really interested in less from a marketing perspective, more from a life perspective. So I find your CV, when I say your CV, I mean your LinkedIn page. I find it really interesting because you have very much been entrepreneurial in pretty much everything you've done. And I'm really curious as to what you think the driver has been for that. Did you mean to do that? Is it just because did you get like an independence thing that came through surfing that you just never really lost?
All right. And I had to go right back, I think. I was thinking about this the other day. So I started surfing when I was 9. And I actually grew up I went to school on the Isle of Wight, which isn't really that well known for surfing. And so around the old age of 11 or 12, I decided I was going to leave home. And I wasn't quite old enough. And we were pretty broke as a family, financially not broke, but broke. So I had to make money. And so I think the entrepreneurial thing goes back to that point in my life, because I'd take my free lunch cards and sell my lunch for £1 to a friend and cash in and take a sandwich to school. So I'd kind of learned how to make money doing things like that. And I'd had like 2 paper rounds, anything I could do to like eventually save enough money so that at the age of kind of 16, 17, I got the train down to Newquay and moved down here. And then I think there's always been this thing about understanding not to trade time for money, and that you can actually create money and generate money. It doesn't have to be, I don't have to go and work. There's a way that it can be created. So I think it goes right back to a long time ago.
That's super interesting. So you probably wouldn't be ever anybody that would get a job now.
Not unless they had like a vested interest in the business that I was working for. Like I'd have to have skin in the game. I would want more than I would want to be like what I was putting in. I'd love to see more back than just that kind of hourly wage.
Yeah.
And that, so.
I think that's the problem, isn't it? With if you're an employee, but you're somebody that comes from a self-employment, I don't know, like motivation. I think that's the problem with salary, is you just think like, it doesn't matter how hard I work, I'm still taking the same package home at the end of the month.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're like self-employed, it's like, okay, you work maybe loads of hours, but you do reap the reward. Totally.
Yeah. And it can go the other way too. Like I'm going to be 40 this year. So I guess what's that 31 years of generating money. And I would say for 2/3 of those years, it's been probably negatives. Do you know what I mean? or like at least half. Like it's always, I've definitely worked more hours for less if you took a bigger picture. But now you can, you have the flexibility and you have like all that kind of stuff.
It's high risk, but it's high reward, isn't it? Like, so it's like you say, you get like the bad times, but then the payoff is that you're working for the good times, which you wouldn't. You're not even in that space if you're an employee. No.
Like, and you don't. It's not like you can just close your laptop down and then go home. Like you're on. So it's a different. It comes at a different kind of cost. It depends, and like some people like one way, and some people prefer it the other way. But.
Yeah, totally. How are you finding it back in Newquay? Have you it's not really real life at the moment, is it?
Yeah, it's funny. It's really nice. Like we have a really good community here of friends, and it's been really cool to be back. Definitely a lot more cafes than 10 years ago, and
which is a good thing because there's good coffee in those cafes. It's
really good, and a lot less stag do's, a lot less mankinis, which is great.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think this kind of like ties into the whole like digital world and COVID. I honestly I feel like with Newquay, with the train link, the airport, and kind of property prices and the beaches and stuff, like I think Newquay and Cornwall in general is going to become a real hub for like skilled young professionals that now can work remotely, whether that's for a company or for their own company. And I think we're going to see, I think it's just the start of what we're going to see is quite a shift. We had the surf school we had in Newquay for 10 years, pretty much every single day. We would have people arrive at the surf school and say, oh man, if I could work from Cornwall, I would be living here in a second.
Yeah.
And fast forward 15, 20 years, most people can now work from Cornwall.
You need to drop them a line and just remind them.
Yeah. So I think Newquay's Newquay's definitely changed since we were last here, and Newquay and Cornwall in general, I feel like will attract a lot of people down here that can now work remotely.
There's a load of really interesting sector opportunities as well coming. It's there's there's the spaceport at the airport. There's things like the geo resources, like the lithium stuff, and it's aside from the kind of more like I was going to say lifestyle, but I didn't mean lifestyle, but there's some real hard industry sectors that are coming through. It's going to be very interesting place to be.
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy. And then weird, completely out of nowhere, you have the G7
I know
in June of all the places in the world that they could go to.
But then when you think about those sectors that are coming through, it makes so much sense, because in terms of the last industrial revolution, Cornwall probably didn't do that great. But like you're saying, with things like digital, and then with things like a lot of renewables coming through in Cornwall, it's actually it's almost like the future place.
Yeah. And we found, I see a lot of similarities between our agency in Canada is based in Squamish, which is between Vancouver, the city, and Whistler, the ski resort. And Squamish for many years was just a login, pretty well closed down login town, pretty not much going on basically after the factories were closed down. But it's the gateway to outdoor adventure. They have a kiteboarding, climbing, mountain biking, all it some of the best in Canada. And we were one of the first people or first agencies to open there, and people thought we were crazy. But it opened it there on the basis that, look, we can't expect someone to work 8 hours a day doing SEO or 8 hours a day doing Google ads and stuff and then just go home. We find that we've been able to attract the kind of people that we want at Marwick, where they will work 8 hours a day on SEO, but then they'll go off climbing, or they're mountain biking or kiteboarding and all this kind of stuff. So I think we'll see a similar kind of thing in Cornwall. Is you do have that outdoor, you have the surfing, you have the beaches for walking your dog, you have all this stuff. So you can work on Zoom like that, like this, and then get out in the fresh air and jump on a bike or,
I think it's a myth that the majority, there's a very small minority that are finishing at 3:00 to go surfing or taking an extended lunch break or whatever to, like, I don't know, windsurf. The majority of people, like you say, are working a normal day, the same as everyone else, but you're closer to a nice environment afterwards or before.
Yeah, well, and if you like, I think Newquay has like 1 million visitors a year or something crazy. Like that's 1 million people coming somewhere they want to be. Why? Like, there's going to be a small portion of those people that are like, well, why don't I just live here, or why don't I live in Cornwall? Especially now. So,
yeah. The other question I had for you, and then I will promise I will let you actually do some work with your day. So I'm really interested in digging a slightly deeper into what really worked for you when you were building your agency in terms of like your own advertising and marketing. So, if somebody's listening that's a freelancer, but they want to know like what really worked for you in growing that business.
I think there wasn't one magic bullet that helped us get to where we are right now, but there's definitely two that jump out at me. It's like as soon as you said that kind of question, one was optimizing our own website. Like it's just for all the services we provided, and we've been doing it for 10 years, and we optimize our own website week in, week out for 10 years. So it generates like 75-80% of our leads. So there's no shortcuts around that. Like there's no quick win with SEO. You just got to do it and do it well. And then the kind of like running parallel to that, and actually like tying into the whole like back facing and Watergate Bay and that creative side back in 2016, 15, when we did, or maybe even before, when we opened our office in Squamish, and everyone thought we were crazy because there was no one really there. To draw attention to ourselves, we put on a marketing conference, and it kind of like, there was kind of the silly thing that some like fat face would have done. Like just, you're having a marketing conference in the backwoods of somewhere. And by the third year, we had attendees of about 1,200 people from all over North America coming to this small town to listen to speakers from like Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, Disney, Pixar. And I think that idea or that kind of concept would have been felt natural and not crazy, although it probably was crazy. Because of all the stuff that I'd seen in the past from like How Fat Faced and those guys would have just gone, well, don't we just put on a marketing conference and pretend that this place is now the cool marketing center of Canada. So I think like that. So we ran that conference for a few years. That got our brand out there for free. Others were sponsoring the event, and then at the same time having that consistent like SEO, that consistent building that footprint online while doing those events and stuff.
I think sometimes with stuff like that, it's like it's almost, I guess I'd call it like lateral thinking, where it's like, okay, so how do I advertise myself without really obviously telling everyone I'm advertising myself?
Yeah.
And I always think when you talk about Watergate Bay, so, they're like Polo on the beach. Is Polo on the beach selling rooms in the hotel directly? No, they're not selling rooms in the hotel. But they, the whole concept is about this idea of bringing people to Watergate Bay and creating a brand of Watergate Bay. And therefore, they also, at the same time, are selling the rooms and everything. And it's stuff like that, isn't it? It's not saying, I don't think what you're saying is if you're a freelancer and you want to get loads of business, set up a conference. I think, translating what you're saying is essentially, think of something that builds your profile, right?
Build a profile, yeah. And like looking at the Watergate Bay thing, back when it was like their idea was their vision in the early days was very similar to the fat-based one. Like I think the original beach hut was designed in such a way that it felt like it was the après ski surf. So you'd come in and you'd walk in with sandy feet and you'd have a burger and a really good hot chocolate. So it's again, it's that vision and that kind of brand alignment with stuff. Like we aligned ourselves with these massive brands at the conference so that we could increase our brand awareness. Watergate would align themselves with the ski resort or the après thing that a lot of their customers were more familiar with.
Yeah.
Surfing and family surfing, especially back then, was quite new. But family ski holidays, everyone had been doing them for generations. So they took that they could pull into the beachside, and that's been a huge thing. I think that Watergate have done really well over the years.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I'm so obsessed with Judy, because she's just the concept and then the delivery of it has just been so impressive, hasn't it?
Yeah, she's an amazing lady.
And when you were, taking a step back before you were at the point as an agency where you were able to do those things. So you said about doing things like going to chamber events and, those initial connections presumably were pretty crucial.
So the early day, like as a solopreneur, I think that's the, you can tell I failed English at GCSEs. It's trust. It's don't try and sell yourself because it just smells like people see through it. Trust. So how do you build trust? Where you show them what they could be doing better and why, and educating people. I actually spent probably the first 2 years going to the chamber events to run workshops to educate people and show people and give them some tips and give them some advice, and that then builds up the trust. Even if it's not directly from that group of people, they might know someone that might need help and so on. And that's definitely the way to get going, is to build the trust. And 90% of the time, that's in what we're doing is education.
And you were doing so presumably you're spending quite a lot of your time for free to do stuff like that as well. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Like I said earlier, if I actually looked at my hourly rate over the last 31 years, it's probably in the pennies.
I know. But then I think you have to do it, don't you? It's,
I don't perceive it as work. Like I don't work. It's a hobby. It's
just life.
It's just, it's a hobby as much as surfing. It's like, because it's creative and it's all those fun stuff.
I do think it's important to, I've spoken to grads in the past who are like, I don't want to do anything for free. I've just studied for like 4 years. And I'm like, oh no, like you have to, once you leave university, you're still at the bottom, essentially. And I think you have to be prepared to give stuff away a bit in order to just build reputation. And like you say, that trust.
I think, you have to do some for free for sure, but hopefully not. Well, if you're good, not for long. Do you know what I mean? That's the thing.
Like, I think that's the, it's about, so I always suggest that it's about building a line with yourself in the first instance before you start, and say like, what am I going to do for free and what do I expect out of it? So for example, with the chamber, you said you did things like workshops. You're not doing that because you're like a really nice guy and you just want, and I think, and that's the thing, is it's not about saying, I'll do that for free when somebody approaches you. It's about like deciding in the first instance, strategically, what am I giving away here?
And what could I potentially get from it? Whether that's a learning experience or a connection or
exactly.
Or
but
when you're not
learning, like you already said that. So
I think like, especially as a recent grad, like even just continuing your learning and you'll learn a lot from working in those environments, even if it's for free or for a lower wage. Like it's just like
but you've got to be strategic about it. You're seeking out those learning opportunities. You're not giving it away because you're desperate. It's Well, thank you so much for joining us. How are you managing your team in Canada from Nuki?
Well, remember, I made myself redundant many years ago. So no, we have a really great management team. Well, we have an incredible team that are very invested and trusted and do an amazing job running it. And then we also have a really great management team. And above the management team, I brought in a business partner, Angie, last summer. And so yeah, it works well. And we have our first employee in the UK, Zoe, that started recently. So we're going to start replicating what we did in Canada here. So yeah, it's fine.
Cool. I'm very excited to see firstly how it develops in Nuki, but also what this campaign is in the summer that that is a badass collaboration.
Yeah, it will be good. It's going to be fun.
Thank you so much, Christian, for sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you. Nice chatting with you.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Marketing Forum podcast. If you are not already, please do like and subscribe. And you can follow us on social media or subscribe to our mailing list to find out more about episodes coming your way soon.